Neil Degrasse Tyson flubs yet again. It is so funny to me that those that hold up peer review as being the pinnacle process for bringing out superior knowledge and truth, they really don't like it when I review Neil Degrasse Tyson by his peers and their knowledge. But we're going to do it anyway. Let's jump right in.
So
is there a God then, Neil Degrasse Tyson? I'll be about to have breaking news.
I don't know.
Is there a God?
Okay, so what I will tell you is that there are a lot of unknowns in the universe, but just because there are unknowns does not mean there's a deity in the unknown. If you're going to assign a deity to that which... It doesn't mean there isn't, that's correct.
So you're more of an open mind about this, right?
Everyone should. If the unknown is the unknown. But the track record of people saying God is behind this, and then you add a little science to it and you find out, no, we can completely explain it and control it.
Did you notice how Neil Degrasse Tyson just tried to reframe everything? Him and Piers Morgan are kind of going back and forth, and at the beginning, Tyson had assumed that Piers was just some kind of dude that didn't really know anything, kind of like you mentioned, hey, you know what dark matter is? You might have heard of it. And then here, Piers Morgan in the middle of what Tyson is saying, but it's like, but that doesn't prove there's not a God either, does it? And all of a sudden Tyson's like, well, and he's kind of caught in the crosshairs. And then Piers Morgan drives it home further and says, you're open-minded, right? And he's like, well, everybody should be. Notice he didn't even finish the sentence. He said, everybody should. And then he jumps into reframing. You see, he's not really after being open-minded. He's trying to build his case of science against the case of religion and God. And so as other people are looking to God as the answer for things, all it takes is a little tiny bit of science, which is this repeating theme that Neil Degrasse Tyson puts out there of how big science is and how small what we don't know is, and then how capable scientists are compared to the rest of us, and how much smarter science is than religion. There's always this comparison going on. He said, so when you add a little bit of science, we can completely explain and control these things. And then he jumps into what these things are. And pay attention to what he says next.
Then the history of that exercise is so rich with science discovering the unknowns that were previously ascribed to deity, like lightning bolts and weather systems. There was Poseidon, there was Zeus, just look at the history of this.
The sheer audacity of Tyson. He states here like, oh, we're going to believe in stuff like Zeus and Poseidon. These things that were relegated to the gods, these Christians and, God lovers and God believers, they have this God of the gaps type of thing. And if they can't explain something, then God surely must be behind it. And so that's always the thing. But a little bit of science just explains all this. And he says, we can totally explain and control these things. But did you catch what he was talking about? I understand the exaggeration here with the Greek gods, Zeus and Poseidon. And he's like, science versus those. Yeah, science versus Greek and the Greek gods it's going to win all day long. But science versus lightning and weather systems, and we can totally explain this? No, we can't. I did hours of research on this, and here's some of the things I came up with. Like, number one, ball lightning. It happens with enough frequency. It happens with enough times that we know that ball lightning exists, but not enough times to be able to have reliable data about it and experimentation where scientists can even say what it is. And in fact, as I'm thinking through this, and we know that ball lightning is present in so many places around the world, and I'm wondering if it doesn't account for a lot of these orbs that we see in pictures, especially when I hear that pilots up in the sky could see these ball lightning. And then there was also submarines underwater that could experience ball lightning in the engine compartment room. And then knowing people that know about these things. And then, but for Neil to say, we could totally explain this. No, we can't. Now, some people have tried to offer some scientific explanations for these things, but they're not based on anything other than some head knowledge. Well, you've got, ball lightning, but what about the Cumba Lightning that's down in the swamps of Venezuela? Like, what do you do with that where there is so much lightning that they have the world's record for the most lightning about half the nights per year? Lightning will show up for upwards of 10 hours, and for every minute there'll be like 28 to 60 strikes per minute. Think about that. Look it up. You should really see some of the displays of the lightning and how glorious this is. These lightning colors are beautiful, and it sounds like they have been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years when you go by the legends in that area. And it's just a part of their culture. And so we've sent scientists down there, and you know what the scientists said when they came back? That's a lot of lightning. But did they totally explain it? No. What about the HDan Lights? Up in the mountains of Norway, these mystery lights that are, maybe they're gas clouds that are lights, and they just kind of float around, and some of them float around for hours. And we've got these on film, and people have gone up there to study them, and it's been happening on and off for 40 years, but we don't know what it is. Or what about the Marfa ghost lights in Texas? No one knows what those lights are either. And then so Tyson is like, we don't have to attribute things to the gods. A little bit of science explains it. We can completely explain it. And then he says, things like lightning bolts. No, we cannot. Further, he says, like weather systems. Do you really think we can totally explain weather systems? How ridiculous. So like with tornadoes, we do know some of the information about tornadoes, and we can give tornado warnings and watches, and we can say these conditions are right and notable for a tornado, but they can't tell you if the tornado is going to manifest out of those conditions. Then they can't tell you with what intensity that it will manifest, or if it did manifest, what intensity would it have. They can also not tell you what the maximum intensity of that tornado would be, nor the duration of the tornado. Oh, but we can completely explain. No, we can't. What about these tropical storms that have, it's called like rapid increase, where they gain power in the winds, upwards of 35 miles an hour of power gain over the course of 24 hours. Now, we know about this phenomenon. You can obviously see on a radar map when a huge tropical storm is moving inland, and you're like, it has the potential to gain speed and power, but they can't tell you when it's going to happen because they don't know what causes it to happen. Well, what about something simple like cloud formation? Well, we're finding out that water under extreme conditions reacts differently and has different densities to it. And so it might act like this or it might act like that. And they don't know which way it's going to react. And it's kind of really hard, as some of the scientists have said, it's really hard to repeat these conditions in a laboratory because they're happening up in the sky in, should we say, God's domain? And so we really don't have it figured out. And then we've come to find out that some rain droplets fall faster than other rain droplets to the tune of like 30%. What's going on there? We do not know. Now that people have some hypotheses, but to say that we can totally explain it, that is a misrepresentation of science by a supposed science communicator. And that's just really, really misleading. And so it's even more misleading than to say that we could control these things. Do you think we can't control any of that? We don't control the weather systems. We don't make it hotter. We don't make it colder. Yes, we can probably store energy, whatnot, from electricity as energy. But are we getting up in the clouds and controlling the lightning bolts and whatnot? Absolutely not. And to say such things is madness. Let's listen to some more madness.
I'm not given reason to say we're going to find something. God is going to be at the center of that, and there'll be no science to apply.
Now that was a devious statement. To talk about God being inside of some sort of substance, to the point where we don't need to explain anything else anymore, that it's just science doesn't work anymore. It's all just about faith. Kind of like there's a final particle that is the existence of God. I don't see any reason to believe that. No, duh. Because we are not saying, no Christian ever is saying that God is in the stuff around us or he's in this universe. We actually say he is behind all of this, controlling the operations of it. I mean, of course there would be no reason to believe that God is a physical type of existence. We already know that God is a spirit, and spirit realm is something totally different than matter and substance and human beings. And so the way Neil crafted that was really crafty indeed. I don't see any reason for, you will never see a physical reasoning or physical piece of science that's going to say that God has a substance. That is just, it's confusing at worst, devious at best. And think about this. If God did miracles and proved himself, if he showed up and just did miracle after miracle after miracle to prove himself to atheists, as soon as he quit doing miracles, you would see and realize that all his power was still behind the scenes.
I'm going to look for the science first, because that's how the history of this exercise has unfolded.
In Neil's summation statement contrasting science against the belief in the existence of God, he says, well, looking at all this and all the information I just postulated to you, I'm just going to look at the science first. That is ridiculous, and let me explain why. Neil is trying to reduce everything to physicality and senses. He's trying to reduce what you know as reality down to just physicality and senses, but it's more than that. Because he said, look at the science first. That's what I'm going to be doing. That's what you need to be doing. But what does he really mean by look at the science first? He doesn't mean senses looking at physicality. He's talking about science as a conceptual concept, as a measurement for the view of reality. And when he says look at it, he doesn't even mean look at it. He means I want you to think about it, ponder it, examine it, weigh out the evidence, and come to a decision and a conclusion. And that's not this physical realm, guys. That is part of who you are as a human being, or as an internal creature, as Christianity tells us, as being spiritual, as having some sort of comprehension of things. But Neil's trying to reduce all that and say, no, everything is just physical, and let's look at science. Well, this means, what this actually means when Neil says, I want you to stop and think about it, what that actually primarily means is Neil is in a conversation with another human being, and they are pontificating, they are thinking about deeper ideas, and he is presenting this to others to think about, as I am doing and reflecting upon, and then presenting this again to you. It's because we're all philosophers first. Deep at heart, we have to philosophize. We have to gather the evidence. We have to gather the ideas about the evidence. And then we have to draw and make conclusions and decisions based on logic and how we feel and what we believe, etc., and tie all that together, which makes us philosophers first. So you can't even look at the science first. That's not the way it works. Further, for science to work, you have to have some prerequisites. You have to, first of all, believe in order, that there is an order to looking at things. Like if you believe that every time you slid atoms under a microscope, if you could slide a microscope or this tray under there which you could see these atomic structures on, if you could see it like that, then do you believe that it would always be there? Yes, you believe there is a constant order to it. You also believe that this atom, hydrogen is always going to look like these other atoms, but maybe in flux. But you're like, I have identified what hydrogen is, and this is what it's always going to look like. You would have to believe in the structure of order. You would also have to believe that human beings are capable of understanding that order. Not that just that it's something physical, not that it's just a reaction of some sort, but that we can actually understand it. There are concepts, this is one of the reasons we go to school, is we get introduced to concepts that are very hard to understand. And when you really get deep into science and math fields and technology, you will find out there's some things that you don't grasp or may not be able to grasp, even though there's other people that have the intellectual capacity to grasp those things and concepts. So science isn't going to give you the order of the universe. It also doesn't give you the belief in the understanding that it's all understanding and comprehensible. We also believe, in order to do science, that we have the ability to validate or invalidate things, which means that we believe in some form or type of truth. All of this is before science. And then we also have to rely on the trust of mankind to actually tell the truth about those things, which in this day and age we're finding a lot of times that's circumvented, baby. A lot of times that's just foregone for the sake of fame, glory, money, and power. But all of those items precede science. He's like, when it comes to God, I'm just going to look at the science first. There are some things that precede science in the category of philosophy. And so when it comes to building a framework of life to operate from, you better choose something that has a proven track record, something that works in all scenarios and cases and ways. And there's nothing out there that's coming even close to Christianity.